Chapter 16. As the carriage drove on through Blackmore Vale, Tess now began to awake from her sorrow and wonder how she could face her parents. She left the carriage and came into Marlott on foot. When she entered the little cottage, her mother was doing the washing as usual.
"Why, Tess!"
she cried when she saw her daughter.
"I thought you were married, really married this time."
"Yes, mother, I am."
"Then where's your husband?"
"Gone away for a time."
"Gone away? When were you married, then? Tuesday, as you said."
"Yes, mother."
"Married on Tuesday, and today it's only Saturday, and he's gone away? What strange husbands you seem to find, Tess."
"Mother." Tess ran across to Joan and put her head on Joan's shoulder. "You told me I mustn't tell him, but I did. I couldn't help it. And he went away."
"Oh, you fool, you little fool!" cried her mother.
I know, sobbed Tess. "But he was so good. I couldn't lie to him. And if only you knew how much I loved him and how much I wanted to marry him."
"Well, it's too late now," said Mrs. Durbeyfield. "Whatever will your father say? He was very proud of your marriage. He's been telling them at the public house that you'll help his noble family become great again. Oh, there he is now."
Tess ran upstairs, but through the thin walls she could hear the whole story being told to Sir John.
"People will laugh at me in the village," he said. "Do you think he really did marry her, Joan? Or is it like the first?"
Tess could listen no more. Even her own family did not believe her. She could not stay. She gave her mother half the money which Claire had given her, and told her family she was going to join him. And so she left Marlott again, looking for work. Angel Clare also returned home. He had spent 3 weeks since his wedding trying to remain calm and continue his studies, but with the disturbing picture of Tess always in his mind. He was beginning to wonder if he had treated her unfairly. She had been so much a part of his plans for the future that he was now thinking of countries where they could farm together. The idea of Brazil attracted him. The countryside, people and habits would be so different. Perhaps they could make a new life there together. So he went back to Emminster to tell his parents his new plan.
"But where's your wife, dear Angel?" cried his mother when he arrived.
"She's at her mother's for the moment. I've come home in rather a hurry because I've decided to go to Brazil."
"Brazil? But they're all Roman Catholics there."
"Are they? I hadn't thought of that." But Mr. and Mrs. Clare were even more interested in their son's marriage than in Brazil's religion.
"Angel, we do want to meet your wife. We're not in the least angry about this rather hurried wedding. So why haven't you brought her? It seems strange."
Angel explained that she would be staying at her mother's, while he went to Brazil alone to see if the country was suitable. He planned to bring her to meet his parents before he went there a second time with her. But his mother was disappointed at not seeing Tess. She watched her son as he ate and asked questions. "Is she very pretty?" "She certainly is."
"And a maiden, of course."
"Of course."
"I imagine you were her first love."
"Exactly." His father asked no questions, but when the moment for evening prayers arrived, he chose a passage from the Bible. "This passage is very suitable as you are here, Angel. It is in praise of a pure wife. We shall all think of her as your father reads it," added his mother. As they listened to the ancient, beautiful words, Angel felt like crying. His mother said, "You see, Angel, the perfect woman, the Bible tells us, is a working woman. Not a fine lady, a girl just like your wife. A girl who uses her hands and heart and head for others. I wish I could have met her, Angel. As she is pure, she is fine enough for me." Claire's eyes were full of tears. He quickly said good night and went to his room. His mother followed and stood at his door, looking anxiously at him. "Angel, why are you going away so soon? Have you quarrelled with your wife in these 3 weeks? Angel, is she a woman with a past?" The mother's instinct had found the cause of her son's worries. "She is totally pure," he replied, and felt that he had to tell that lie, even if he went to hell there and then for it. Then never mind the rest. There are few better things in nature than a pure country girl. Claire felt furious with Tess, because she had forced him to deceive his parents. Then he remembered her sweet voice, and the touch of her fingers on his face, and her warm breath on his lips. But this well-meaning young man, despite his advanced ideas, was still limited in his thinking. He could not see that Tess was in character as pure as the pure wife in the Bible. The next day Claire left Emminster and began to prepare for his journey to Brazil. One day, returning from doing some business with a farmer, he happened to meet one of the dairymaids from Talbot Hayes, Is Hewitt. He knew her secret. She was an honest girl who loved him, and who might have made as good a farmer's wife as Tess. He learned from Is that of the other dairymaids, Retty had become ill, and Marion had started drinking. And Is herself? "Suppose I had asked you to marry me, Is?" he asked. "I would have said yes, and you would have had a woman who loved you." A wild anger took hold of Claire. Society and its rules had trapped him in a corner. Why shouldn't he take his revenge on society? "I am going to Brazil, Is, without Tess. We have separated for personal reasons. I may never be able to love you, but will you come with me?" "Yes, I will," said Is after a pause. "You know it's wrong in the eyes of the world, don't you? Do you love me very much? More than Tess?" "I do. Yes, oh, I do love you. But not more than Tess. Nobody could. She would have laid down her life for you." Claire was silent. A sob rose inside him. He heard Izzy's words again and again in his head. She would have laid down her life for you. "I'm sorry, Iz," he said suddenly. "Please forget what I said just now. I must be mad." "Oh, please take me." "Oh, I shouldn't have been so honest," sobbed Iz. "Iz, by your honesty, you have saved me from doing something wicked. Thank you for that, and please forgive me." And so Angel said goodbye to the miserable girl. But he did not turn towards Tess's village. He continued with his plan, and 5 days later left the country for Brazil. And so the months passed. Tess found occasional dairy work for the spring and summer. She sent all Angel's money to her family, who as usual had many expenses and hardly any income. She was too proud to ask Angel's family for more money. That winter she went to work at another farm, where Marion was working. Here the earth was poor, and the work was difficult. But Tess did not mind the hard work in the fields. As she and Marion dug out the vegetables in the pouring rain, they talked of Talbot Hayes, and of the sunny green fields, and of Angel Clare. Tess did not tell Marion everything, so Marion could not understand why the couple were apart. They wrote to Iz, asking her to join them if she had no other work. It was the coldest winter for years, but Tess and Marion had to go on working in the snow. Tess realized that the farmer was the same Trantridge man who had recognized her in the market town and had been knocked down by Angel. He made her work twice as hard as the others. When Iz came, Tess saw her whispering to Marion. Tess had a feeling it was important. "Is it about my husband?" she asked Marion later. "Well, yes. Iz said I shouldn't tell, but he asked her to run away to Brazil with him." Tess's face went as white as the snow on the ground. "What happened?" "He changed his mind, but he was going to take her." Tess burst out crying. "I must write to him. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left it to him. He said I could write to him. I've been neglecting him." But in the evening, in her room, she could not finish her letter to him. She looked at her wedding ring, which she wore round her neck in the day, and kept on her finger all night. What kind of husband would ask Iz to go to Brazil with him, so soon after parting from his wife? But this new information made her think again of visiting Angel's family in Emminster. She wanted to know why he had not written to her. She could meet his parents, who would surely be kind to her in her loneliness. So she decided to walk there from the farm at Flintcombe Ash on a Sunday, her only free day. It was 15 miles each way. She dressed in her best, encouraged by Marion and Iz, who sent her on her way at 4 o'clock in the morning. The girl sincerely loved Tess and wished for her happiness. It was a year since her wedding, and on that bright cold morning her unspoken hope was to win over her husband's family, and so persuade him back to her. Although she started cheerfully, she began to lose her courage as she approached Emminster. The church looked forbidding. Perhaps the rather strict parson would not approve of her travelling so far on a Sunday. But she had to go on. She took off her thick walking boots and hid them behind a tree, changing into her pretty shoes. She would collect the boots on the way out of town. She took a deep breath and rang the bell at the parson's house. Nobody answered. She tried again. Silence. It was almost with relief that she turned and walked away. Then she suddenly remembered that they must all be at church. So she waited in a quiet part of the street until people began to stream out of church. She immediately recognized Angel's brothers, and even overheard some of their conversation. "Poor Angel," one of them said. "There's that nice girl Mercy Chant. Why on earth didn't he marry her instead of rushing into marriage with a dairymaid? It's certainly very strange, but his ideas have always been most odd." They joined Mercy Chant as she came out of church, and walked together along the road Tess had walked into Emminster. "Look, here's a pair of old boots," said one of the brothers, noticing Tess's boots behind the tree. "Excellent walking boots, I see," said Miss Chant. "How wicked to throw them away. Give them to me. I'll find a poor person who would like them." Tess walked quickly past them, tears running down her face. She continued walking as fast as she could, away from Emminster. How unlucky that she had met the sons, and not the father. Angel's parents would have taken poor lonely Tess to their hearts immediately, as they did every other lost soul, without thought of family or education or wealth. She grew more and more tired and depressed as she walked the 15 miles back to Flintcombe Ash, where only hard work awaited her. But on the way she noticed a crowd listening to a preacher, and she stopped for a while to join them. The preacher was describing with enthusiasm how he had been wicked for years, and how a certain parson had pointed it out to him. This had gradually turned him from wickedness. But Tess was more shocked by the voice than the words. She moved round behind the crowd to look at his face. As the afternoon sun shone full on him, she recognized Alec d'Urberville. A Changed Man. Chapter 17. This was the first time she had seen or heard of d'Urberville since she had left Trantridge, and although he stood there openly as a preacher, as a religious man, she still felt afraid of him. He had changed his clothes, his hair, his moustache, and his expression. But could she really believe that he had changed his most secret thoughts and beliefs? As soon as she recovered from her surprise, she moved away so that he would not notice her. But he suddenly caught sight of her, and the effect on him was electric. His enthusiasm faded, his voice hesitated, his lips trembled, his eyes dropped in confusion. Tess walked rapidly away along the road. However, as she walked, she felt he must be looking at her back as she walked away. And now she knew she could never escape the past as she had hoped. Reminders of her past would surround her until she died. As she walked uphill, she heard footsteps behind her, and turning saw that it was the one person in the whole world she did not want to meet this side of the grave. "Tess," he said, "I'm Alec d'Urberville." "I see you are," she said coldly. They walked on together. "You may wonder why I'm following you. Well, I feel you are the person I would most like to save from hell, so I have come to do that." "Have you saved yourself?" Tess asked bitterly. "God has done it all, not me. I must tell you how I came to believe in him. Have you ever heard of the parson of Emminster, old Mr. Clare? A very strict, sincere man." "I have," said Tess. "Well, he came to Trantridge once, and tried to show me how wicked my life was. I insulted him at the time, but later my mother died, and somehow I began to think about what old Mr. Clare said. Since then, my one desire has been to help others to understand God too." "Don't go on," cried Tess. "I can't believe in such a sudden change. I almost hate you for talking to me like this, when you know how you've ruined my life. You enjoy yourself for a while, and then you make sure of your place in heaven." As she spoke, she looked him full in the face with her great beautiful eyes. "Don't look at me like that," said Alec. "Your eyes remind me of... well, women's faces have too much power over me. Don't look at me. It might be dangerous for you." Eventually they came to a crossroads, where a strange stone stood. It was a lonely, unfriendly place, where people did not like to stay for long. Alec stopped here. "I must go to the right here. I'm preaching at 6 this evening. Tell me, how has your life been since we last met?" Tess told him about the baby. Alec was shocked. "You should have told me. But before we part, come, put your hand on this stone. It was once a holy cross. I'm afraid of your power over me. Swear on the cross that you will never tempt me into wickedness." "Good God! How can you ask such an unnecessary thing? I don't want to see you ever again." "No, but swear it." Tess placed her hand on the stone and swore. "I shall pray for you," called Alec as he walked away. "Who knows? We may meet again." Tess went on her way feeling upset, and soon met a man on the road. He told her that the cross was not religious, but marked the place where a criminal was put to death and buried. Trembling a little at this information, she finally arrived at Flintcomb Ash. One day the following week, when Tess was working in the fields as usual, Alec d'Urberville came to see her. He explained to her that he intended to sell his land at Trantridge and go to help poor people in Africa. "Will you help me put right the wicked thing I did to you? Will you be my wife?" "Oh, no, sir!" she cried, horrified. "Why not?" Disappointment was visible in his face. It was not only duty which pushed him to make this offer, but also his old passion for her. "You know I don't love you," answered Tess. "In fact, I love somebody else." "Perhaps that is only a passing feeling." "No." "Yes. Why not? You must tell me." "Well, then, I have married him." "Ah!" he cried, and looked hard at her. "It's a secret here," she begged. "Please don't tell anybody."
"Who is he?" asked d'Urberville. "Where is he? Why isn't he here to look after you? What sort of husband can he be, leaving you to work like this?"
"Don't ask!"
cried Tess, her eyes flashing. "Your eyes," whispered Alec. "I thought I no longer felt anything for you. But when I look into your eyes—" He took her hand. She pulled it quickly away.
"Go now. Please, in the name of your new religion, go. Respect me and my husband."
"Don't worry. I can control myself.
I just hoped that our marriage would take away the bad in both of us.
But that plan is no good now."
He walked slowly away, his head bent in thought. The farmer approached at that moment, and was angry with Tess for wasting time talking to a stranger. Tess preferred hard words from this man of stone to sweet ones from Alec d'Urberville. For a moment, however, she imagined escaping from her present hard life by marrying Alec, but rejected it immediately. At home that night, she began a letter to Claire, telling him of her great love for him. Reading between the lines, he would have seen her secret fear for the future. But again she could not finish the letter, thinking of his offer to Is, and so he never received it. On a Sunday in February, she was eating her lunch in the cottage where she lived, when d'Urberville knocked at the door. He rushed in and threw himself into a chair.
"Tess!" he cried desperately. "I can't help it. I can't stop thinking of you. Pray for me, Tess."
Tess did not pity him. "I cannot, because I don't believe God would change his plans just because I asked him."
"Who told you that?"
"My husband."
"Ah, your dear husband. Tell me what he believes."
Tess explained, as clearly as she could remember, Angel's beliefs. Alec watched her closely.
"The fact is, you just believe whatever he says. That's just like you women."
"Ah, that's because he knows everything," Tess replied with enthusiasm. "What is good enough for him is good enough for me."
Interesting," murmured d'Urberville.
"Perhaps he understands religion better than old Mr. Clare. Perhaps he's right not to attach too much importance to the Bible and to fixed ideas. Perhaps I was wrong to become a preacher. Today I should be preaching at 2:30, and here I am. My passion for you was too strong for me." "You have let all those people down. They are waiting for you."
"What do I care? You are the one woman I have always wanted. Why have you tempted me away from religion? I can't resist you."
His black eyes flashed passionately. He advanced towards her.
"I couldn't help your seeing me again,"
cried Tess, moving nervously away from him.
"Please leave me. Remember, I am married. Remember, I can't defend myself."
Alex stopped, turned and went out without another word. But he went on thinking of Angel's religious logic, as explained by Tess. It seemed to make sense.
"That clever husband doesn't know that his ideas may lead me back to her." He laughed to himself.
In March, the threshing machine came for a day to Flintcomb. It was a huge red machine which ate all the corn the farm workers could feed it. Next to it stood the engine which ran it, and the engineer. He lived in a world of fire and smoke, and was permanently black as if he came from hell. The farmer put Tess next to the threshing machine, so that she had the hardest and most tiring job of all. She had little chance to talk or rest, and at lunchtime was about to start eating, when she noticed d'Urberville approaching. He had changed his parson's clothes, and now looked just like the young gentleman she had first met at Trantridge. "I am here again, you see," he said, smiling at her.
"Why do you bother me like this?"
she cried.
"You trouble me. Your eyes look at me night and day.
I can't forget them. Tess, when you told me about that child of ours, my feelings for you became strong again. I have lost interest in religion, and it is your fault." "You have stopped preaching?" asked Tess, shocked. "I have. What a lot of stupid people they are to listen to a preacher anyway, and I am convinced that your wonderful husband's views are better than old Parson Clare's. I don't know how I became so enthusiastic, so now here I am, my love, just as in the old times." "Not like that at all. No, now it's different," she said firmly. "Oh, why couldn't you stay religious?" "Because you've explained your husband's ideas so well to me that I accept them." "But seriously, Tess, you need help. I am here, and this husband of yours is not. Come with me. My carriage is waiting the other side of the field. You have tempted me. Now share my life forever." He put an arm round her waist. Tess was red with anger, but said nothing. She picked up a heavy leather glove and hit him in the face with it. It was an action which her ancestors must have often practised. Alec jumped up and wiped the blood from his mouth. "Remember one thing," he said angrily, only just controlling himself as he held her by the shoulders. "Remember, my lady, if you are any man's wife, you are mine. I will have you again. I'll come back for an answer later on." So he left, and the farm workers started the afternoon's threshing. It went on until the evening, as the work had to be finished that day. Tess became more and more exhausted, and was near to fainting when they finally stopped. Alec d'Urberville, who had been waiting for this moment, appeared at her side. "You are so weak," he said, holding her arm. "I've told the farmer he should not use women for work with a threshing machine. It's too hard. I'll walk home with you." "Oh, yes, please do," murmured Tess, too tired to be afraid of him. "You are kind sometimes, and at least you wanted to put right the wrong by offering to marry me." "If I can't marry you, at least I can help you. I have finished with religion, but you must trust me. I have enough money to help your family and make them comfortable." "Have you seen them lately?" asked Tess quickly. "God knows they need help, but no. No, I can take nothing from you, either for them or for me. Please, leave me alone." As soon as she reached her room, she wrote a passionate letter to Angel. "My own husband. I must call you that. I must ask you for help. I have no one else. I am so open to temptation, Angel. I cannot tell you who it is. Can't you come to me now, before anything terrible happens? I know you are far away, but I need help. I know I deserve the punishment you gave me, but please, Angel, please be kind to me. If you would come, I could die in your arms. I live only for you. Don't think I shall be bitter because you left me. I am so lonely without you, my darling. Haven't you ever felt one little bit of your love for me at the dairy? I am the same woman you fell in love with then. The very same. As soon as I met you, the past was dead for me. Can't you see this? How silly I was to trust that you would always love me. I ought to have known I couldn't be so lucky. People say I am still rather pretty, Angel, but I don't care about my looks because you are not here. If you won't come to me, could I come to you? I'm so worried. I'm afraid I may fall into some wicked trap. Save me from what threatens me. Your faithful, heartbroken Tess. Chapter 18. This desperate cry for help eventually arrived at the parson's house in Emminster. Old Mr. Clare was pleased. "I think this letter is from Angel's wife. I hope this will bring him home more quickly. He did say he was planning to come home next month." "Dear boy, I hope he will get home safely," murmured Mrs. Clare. "I still feel he should have gone to university like the other two. He should have had the same chance as them, church or no church." This was the only complaint she ever made to her husband. He too was worried that he had been unfair to Angel. They blamed themselves for this unfortunate marriage. If Angel had studied at Cambridge, he would never have become a farmer and married a country girl. Still, his more recent letters showed that Angel was planning to come home to fetch her. So perhaps their quarrel, whatever it was, could be settled. Angel himself was at this moment riding across Brazil towards the coast. He had never completely recovered from the serious illness he had had when he first arrived. He was not as strong as before, and looked much older. The country had been a disappointment to him. Many farmers had come here from England, hoping to make their fortune, and had died in the fields or on the roads. He knew now he could not farm here. His attitude to life had changed during this time. He began to look again at what was right and wrong. He began to see that a person should be judged not only on what he has done, but also on what he wanted to do. He began to think that he had perhaps been unfair to Tess, and he thought about her with growing affection. He wondered why she had not written. He forgot that he had told her not to write first. He did not realize that she was obeying his orders exactly, although it was breaking her heart. On his journey, he travelled with another Englishman. They were both depressed, and both told each other their problems. The stranger was older and more experienced than Angel. He had a different, more open approach to life. He told Angel clearly that he was wrong in parting from Tess. The next day they got wet in a thunderstorm. The stranger fell ill and died a few days later. Death came as no surprise in that unfriendly land. Clare buried him and continued his journey. The man's words were somehow given greater importance by his unexpected death, and suddenly Clare felt ashamed. Tess had committed no crime. He should believe in her character, and not object to a past action she could not avoid. He remembered the words of Is Hewitt. "She would have laid down her life for you." No woman could do more. How she had looked at him on their wedding day, as if he were a god. And during that terrible evening by the fireside, when she told him her story, how desperately sad she had been to realize he might not love her any more. Meanwhile, Tess was not hopeful that Angel would come in answer to her letter. The past had not changed, so he might not change either. Nevertheless, she spent her spare time preparing for his possible return, practicing singing the songs he used to like, tears rolling down her cheeks all the while. One evening she was in the cottage as usual, when there was a knock at the door. A tall, thin girl came in, and Tess recognized her young sister, Liza Lou. "Liza Lou," said Tess. "What's the matter?" "Mother is very ill," her sister said seriously. "And father is not well either, and says a man of such noble family shouldn't have to work, so we don't know what to do." Tess thought for a moment. She realized she had to go home immediately, although her time was not yet up at the farm. She left her sister to rest for a while, and she herself set off at once with her possessions in a basket. Although it was night, and she had a 15-mile walk, she felt quite safe. She was only worried about her mother, and did not notice the strange shapes of trees and hedges in the darkness. At 3 in the morning, she passed the field where she had first seen Angel Clare, and felt again the disappointment when he did not dance with her. and when she saw the family cottage, it seemed to be part of her body and life, as it always did. She found her mother recovering from her illness, and took over as head of the household. Her father did not seem ill, and had a new plan for earning money. "I'm going to find all the historians round here," he said, "and get them to pay money to keep me going. After all, they pay to look after old ruins, and I'm of historical interest. I think they'll be pleased to do it." Tess did not have time to answer. She nursed her mother, fed the children, and worked in the garden, planting vegetables for next year. She enjoyed working outside among her neighbours. One evening, when it was almost dark, she was digging happily in the vegetable garden some distance from the cottage. It was a clear, fresh night, with smoke blowing about from small fires in the gardens. Suddenly she saw a man's face in the light of a fire. It was d'Urberville. She gasped and stepped back, her face pale. "What are you doing here?" "My dear Tess, I just want to help you, to see you." "Have you finished at that farm?" "Yes, I have." "Where are you going next? To join your dear husband?" "Oh, I don't know," she said bitterly. "I have no husband." "That is quite true in one way, but you have a true friend. When you go back to your cottage, you'll see what I've done for you." "Oh, Alec, I wish you wouldn't give me anything. I have enough. I just don't want to live at all." Her tears fell as she started digging again. When she looked round, d'Urberville had left. On her way back, one of her sisters rushed towards her, shouting, "Tess! Tess, Mother is much better, but Father is dead." "But Father was only a little bit ill," said Tess, trying to take in the news. "He dropped down just now, and the doctor said there was no hope for him because it's his heart." Poor John Durbeyfield's death had more importance than his family realized at first. The cottage was in his name. On his death, the farmer who owned it decided to put farm workers in it and told the Durbeyfields to leave. They were not much respected in the village because of John's laziness. Tess also felt guilty that her presence might have influenced the farmer. The village people clearly thought she was not a good example for their children. So, on Lady Day, the Durbeyfields had to leave their old home. The night before they left, d'Urberville came to visit Tess, to offer her and her family a little house on his land at Trantridge. Her mother could look after the chickens, and he would pay for the children to go to school. Tess firmly rejected his offer, but when he had gone, for the first time a feeling of anger rose in her against her husband. She had never intended to do wrong, and he had punished her too hard. She passionately wrote these few words to him. "Oh, why have you treated me so badly, Angel? I do not deserve it. You are cruel. I intend to forget you. You have been so unfair to me. T." She ran out and posted it before she could change her mind. "I see there's been a visitor," said her mother, coming into the living room later. "Your husband, was it?" "No, it wasn't him. He'll never, never come," said Tess hopelessly. She had said it was not her husband, but she was feeling more and more that d'Urberville was physically her husband. Next day, their possessions were put on a wagon and taken to Kingsbere. Mrs. Durbeyfield had booked rooms there, as it was the family home of the d'Urbervilles, and she still hoped some good would come of belonging to the ancient family. But as they approached Kingsbere, after a long and tiring day's journey, a man came to tell them there were no rooms available. Tess and her mother unloaded the wagon and left the children and furniture near the churchyard wall, while they looked for somewhere to stay. But all the rooms were full. Tess looked desperately at the pile of their possessions. In the cold sunlight of this spring evening, the furniture looked old and the pots looked worn. "Tombs belong to families forever, don't they?" asked her mother brightly, having looked round the churchyard. "Well, that's where we'll stay, children, until the place of your ancestors finds us some shelter." Tess helped her mother move the big bed against the church wall. Underground were the tombs of the d'Urbervilles, and at the head of the bed was a beautiful old window, in which the symbols on the D'Urberfield seal and spoon could be seen. The children were put to bed, all together for warmth and comfort. "Tomorrow we'll find somewhere better," said Joan cheerfully. "But, Tess, what's the good of you playing at marrying gentlemen if it leaves us like this?" Tess went inside the ancient church and stared sadly at the tombs of her ancestors. She thought she saw a movement, and turned to look again at a stone figure lying on a tomb. When she saw it was Alec d'Urberville lying there, she almost fainted. "I'm going to help you," he said, jumping up and smiling at her. "You'll see that I'm more useful than a real d'Urberville. I'll see your mother. You'll thank me for this." And he brushed past her. She dropped her head on the cold stone of the tomb. "Why am I on the wrong side of this stone?" she whispered. Marion and Iz had seen Tess moving house with her family, and knew what a difficult position she was in. They generously hoped she would one day be happy with Angel again, and were afraid for her, knowing that Alec d'Urberville was constantly tempting her. They decided to write a letter to Angel Clare, to inform him of the dangerous situation his wife was in. This is what they wrote. "Dear Sir, watch out for your wife if you love her as much as she loves you. She is in danger from an enemy in the shape of a friend. A woman's strength cannot last forever, and water, if it drops continually, will wear away a stone. Yes, even a diamond. From 2 well-wishers." The end. Chapter 19. It was evening in the parson's house at Emminster. Mr. and Mrs. Clare were waiting anxiously for Angel's return. "He won't be here yet, my dear," said old Mr. Clare, as his wife went to the front door for the 10th time. "Remember, his train doesn't come in till 6 o'clock, and then he has to ride 10 miles on our old horse." "But he used to do it in an hour," said his wife impatiently. Both knew it was useless to talk about it, and the only thing to do was wait. When they heard footsteps, they rushed outside to meet the shape in the darkness. "Oh, my boy, home at last!" cried Mrs. Clare, who at that moment cared no more for Angel's lack of religion than for the dust on his clothes. What woman, in fact, however firm her beliefs, would not sacrifice her religion for her children? Nothing was more important to Mrs. Clare than Angel's happiness. But as soon as they reached the living room, she saw his face clearly in the light of the candles. She gave a cry and turned away in sorrow. "Oh, it's not the Angel who went away." Even his father was shocked to see the change in his son. They would not have recognized him if they had passed him in the street. The cruel climate and hard work had aged him by 20 years. He was like a shadow, thin and bony, with no spring in his step and no enthusiasm in his eyes. "I was ill over there," he said, noticing his parents' concern. He had to sit down, being weak after his journey. "Has any letter come for me?" he asked eagerly. "The last one—" "From your wife?" "Yes. I didn't get it until very recently, as I was travelling. If I had received it earlier, I would have come sooner." They gave him a letter that had been waiting for his arrival. Angel read it rapidly. It was Tess's last letter, short and desperate. "Oh, why have you treated me so badly, Angel? I do not deserve it. You are cruel. I intend to forget you. You have been so unfair to me. T." "It is all quite true," cried Angel hopelessly, throwing down the letter. "Perhaps you will never take me back." "Angel, don't worry so much about a country girl," said his mother, anxious about her son's state of mind. "You know, I've never told you, but she is actually a descendant of one of the oldest, noblest families in England, a d'Urberville, in fact. And do you know why I left her? How could I be so narrow-minded? I left her because I discovered she was not the pure country girl I thought. She had been seduced by a so-called gentleman, but it wasn't her fault. And I know now that her whole character is honest and faithful. I must get her back." After this outburst, Angel went to bed early and thought about the situation. In Brazil, it had seemed easy to rush straight back into Tess's loving arms whenever he chose to forgive her. However, now he knew she was angry with him for leaving her for so long. He admitted she was right to be angry. So he decided to give her time to think about their relationship, and wrote to her at Marlott, instead of going to see her. To his surprise, he received in reply a note from her mother. "Dear Sir, my daughter is not with me at the moment, and I don't know when she'll come back. I will let you know when she does. I cannot tell you where she is staying. We don't live in Marlott any more. Yours, J. Derbyfield." At first, Claire decided to wait for further information from Tess's mother. But then he reread the letter sent on to him in Brazil, written from Flintcomb Ash. "I live only for you. Don't think I shall be bitter because you left me. I am so lonely without you, my darling. Haven't you ever felt one little bit of your love for me at the dairy? I am the same woman you fell in love with then, the very same. As soon as I met you, the past was dead for me." He was so touched, he felt he must go immediately to find her, however angry she and her family might be with him. While he was packing, the letter from Iz and Marion arrived, and made him hurry even more. His search for Tess took him first to Flintcomb Ash, where he discovered she had never used her married name. He began to realize, too, what hardship she had suffered, rather than ask his family for money. Next he travelled to Marlott, but found the Derbyfield cottage occupied by others. As he left the village, he passed the field where he had first seen Tess at the dance. He could not bear to see it, because Tess was not there. In the churchyard, he saw a new headstone, on which was written, "In memory of John Derbyfield, rightly d'Urberville, of the once powerful family of that name, and direct descendant of Sir Pagan d'Urberville, died March the 10th, 1800 and—" A gravedigger noticed Claire looking at it, and called to him. "Ah, sir, that man didn't want to be buried here, but in his ancestors' tombs at Kingsbere." "So why wasn't he buried there?" "No money. In fact, sir, even this headstone has not been paid for." Claire went immediately to pay the bill for the stone, and set out towards Shaston, where he found Mrs. Derbyfield and her children living in a small house. She seemed embarrassed to see him. "I'm Tess's husband," he said awkwardly. "I want to see her at once. You were going to write and tell me where she is. Is she well?" "I don't know, sir, but you ought to." You're right. I ought to know that about my own wife. Where is she?" Mrs. Durbeyfield would not reply. "Do you think Tess would want me to try and find her?" "I don't think she would." He was turning away, and then he thought of Tess's letter. "If you would come, I could die in your arms. I live only for you. I am so lonely without you, my darling." He turned back. "I'm sure she would," he said passionately. "I know her better than you do." "I expect you do, sir, for I have never really known her. Please, Mrs. Durbeyfield, please tell me where she is. Please be kind to a miserable, lonely man." There was a pause after this cry from the heart. Finally Tess's mother replied in a low voice, "She's at Sandbourne." "Thank you," he said, relieved. "Do you need anything?" "No, thank you, sir," said Joan Durbeyfield. "We are well provided for." Clare took the train to Sandbourne. On his arrival at 11 o'clock in the evening, he took a room in a hotel and walked around the streets in the hope of meeting Tess. But it was too late to ask anybody. It seemed a strange place to Clare. It was a bright, fashionable holiday town, with parks, flower beds, and amusements. This new town, a product of modern civilization, had grown up near the ancient Egdon Woods, where the paths over the hills had not changed for 1,000 years. He walked up and down the wide streets, trying to admire the modern buildings. He felt confused. The sea murmured, and he thought it was the trees. The trees murmured, and he thought it was the sea. He could not understand what had brought Tess here. This was a town for relaxation, for pleasure, not for a working girl like Tess. There were no cows to milk here, and no vegetables to dig. He looked at the lights in the bedroom windows, and wondered which one was hers. Before going to bed, he reread Tess's passionate letter. He could not sleep that night. At the post office next morning, they knew nothing of the names of Clare or Durbeyfield. "But there is a name of d'Urberville, at Mrs. Brooks," said the postman. "That's it!" cried Clare, pleased to think she had taken her ancestor's name, as he had suggested. He made his way quickly to Mrs. Brooks's house, following the postman's directions. It was a large, impressive house, and he wondered if he should go to the back door, as Tess was probably a servant here. But he rang at the front. Mrs. Brooks herself appeared. "Is Teresa d'Urberville here?" he asked. "Mrs. d'Urberville?" "Yes." He felt pleased that she was known there as a married woman. "Please tell her that a relation wants to see her. Say it's Angel." "Mr. Angel?" "No, just Angel. She'll know." Angel waited in the sitting-room, his heart beating painfully. "Whatever will she think of me?" he thought. "I look so different, so much older." He was still weak after his illness. He could hardly stand, and held on to the back of a chair as she entered the room. He was not prepared for what he saw. Tess was wearing fashionable clothes, and looked even more beautiful than he remembered. He had held out his arms, but they fell to his side because she stood still in the doorway. He thought she could not bear his changed appearance. "Tess," he whispered. His voice was low and breaking with emotion. "Can you forgive me for going away? Can't you come to me? Why are you so beautiful?" "It is too late," she said, her voice hard, and her eyes shining unnaturally.
"I didn't see you as you really were. Please forgive me, Tessie," he begged.
"Too late, too late," she said, waving her hand impatiently. "Don't come close, Angel. Keep away."
"But is it that you don't love me, my dear wife?
Because I've been ill.
I've come to find you. My parents will welcome you. I've told them everything."
Yes, yes, but it is too late. Every moment seemed like an hour to her. She felt as if she was in a dream, trying to escape, but unable to. "Don't you know what has happened? I waited and waited for you, but you didn't come. And I wrote to you, and you didn't come. He kept on saying you would never come back again. And he was very kind to my family. After Father's death, I don't understand. He has won me back to him." Claire stared at her. He saw her fashionable clothes. He saw her relaxed, well-fed body. He saw her white, delicate hands. At last he understood, and fell into a chair as if hit on the head. She continued, "He is upstairs. I hate him now, because he told me a lie that you would never return, and you have returned. Will you go away now, Angel, please, and never come back?" They looked at each other without joy and without hope, desperately wanting to be sheltered from reality. "It's my fault," said Claire. But talking did not help. The Tess he had first loved had separated her body from her soul. Her soul remained and would remain faithful to him forever. But what happened to her body no longer interested her after he had rejected it. After a few moments of confused reflection, he realized Tess had left the room. His mind was in a fog. He felt very cold and very ill. Somehow he found himself in the street, walking, although he did not know where. Mrs. Brooks was not usually curious about her guests. She was too interested in the money they paid her to ask many questions. However, Angel Clare's visit to her wealthy guests, Mr. and Mrs. d'Urberville, as she knew them, was unusual enough to interest her. She could hear parts of the conversation between the two lost souls, and when Tess went back upstairs, Mrs. Brooks crept quietly up to listen outside the bedroom door. She heard Tess sobbing, and through the keyhole could see her half lying over the breakfast table.
"And then my dear husband came home to me, and it's too late, because you persuaded me, you with your fine words, as you did when you seduced me. You told me he would never come back, but he did. And you helped my family, and that's how you persuaded me so cleverly. And when I believed you and came to live with you, he came back. And now I've lost him a second time, and this time forever. He will hate me now."
She turned her tear-stained face, and Mrs. Brooks could see how she was suffering.
"And he's dying. He looks as if he's dying. It will be my fault if he dies. You have destroyed my life and his. I can't bear it. I can't."
The man spoke sharply, and after that there was silence. Mrs. Brooks went back downstairs to wait until she was called to take their breakfast away. She could hear Tess moving about, and then saw Tess leave the house, fully dressed in her fashionable clothes. Perhaps Mr. d'Urberville was still asleep, as he did not like getting up early. Mrs. Brooks wondered who this morning's visitor was, and where Mrs. d'Urberville had gone so early. Just then she noticed a mark on the ceiling. It seemed to be spreading. It was red, and when she stood on the table and touched it, it looked like blood. She ran up to listen at the bedroom door again. The dead silence was broken only by a regular drip, drip, drip. She ran wildly out into the street and begged a man she knew to come back with her. Together they hurried upstairs and pushed open the bedroom door. The breakfast lay untouched on the table, but the large knife was missing. They found it in Alec d'Urberville's heart. He lay on the bed, pale, fixed, dead, still bleeding. Soon the news spread all over Sanborn that Mrs. Brooks's guest had been killed by his young wife. Chapter 20. Meanwhile, Angel Clare returned to his hotel and sat for a while over breakfast staring into space. A note arrived from his mother, saying that his brother Cuthbert was going to marry Mercy Chant. Clare threw away the paper. At last he got up, paid the bill, and went to the railway station. But he could not sit patiently and wait for the next train in an hour's time. He had nothing to wish for in life, and nobody to love. He was in no hurry, but just wanted to get out of that town as soon as possible. So he started walking along the road out of town. The road was open and dropped down to cross a valley. When he was climbing the far side of the valley, he stopped for breath, and something made him turn round. There was a small black figure in the distance, a human figure, running. Clare waited. It looked like a woman, but he never imagined that it could be his wife, until she came close, and he saw it was Tess. "I saw you turn onto the road from the station, and I've been following you all this way." She was pale, breathless, and trembling. He did not question her, but took her arm and helped her along. They took a footpath under some trees to avoid being seen. "Angel," she said, "do you know why I've been running after you? To tell you that I've killed him." There was a pitiful smile on her white face as she spoke. "What?" he cried, thinking her mind was disturbed. "I don't know how I did it," she said. "I had to do it, for you and me, Angel. I was afraid long ago, when I hit him in the mouth with that heavy glove, that I might kill him one day. He has come between us and ruined our lives. I never loved him at all, Angel. You believe me, don't you? Oh, why did you go away when I loved you so much? But I don't blame you, Angel. Only, will you forgive me now? I could not bear losing you any longer. I had to kill him. Say you love me now. Say you do." "Oh, I do love you, Tess, I do. It has all come back," he said, holding her tightly in his arms. "But what do you mean? You've killed him." "He is dead. He heard me crying about you, and he called you rude names. I couldn't bear it, so I killed him." Eventually, Angel came to believe that she probably had killed d'Urberville. He was amazed at the strength of her feeling, and this, it seemed, had made her forget the difference between right and wrong. She did not seem to realize what she had done, and laid her head on his shoulder, crying with happiness. He wondered if the bad blood of the d'Urbervilles was to blame for this moment of madness. However, he knew he could not leave her now. She expected him to protect her. And at last, Clare felt nothing but love for this passionate, loving wife of his. He kissed her again and again, and held her hand. "I won't leave you. I'll protect you as well as I can, my dearest love, whatever you may or may not have done." They walked on, Tess turning her head occasionally to look at him. For her, he was still perfection, despite his thinness and pale face. He was the one man who had loved her purely, and who believed in her as pure. Their arms around each other's waists, they walked through the woods on lonely footpaths, taking care not to meet anybody. They did not talk much, being content to be together at last. "Where shall we go?" asked Tess. "I don't know. Perhaps we could find a cottage to stay in tonight. Can you walk a long way, Tessie?" "Oh, yes. I could walk forever with your arm around me." At midday, Angel went to a public house and brought food and wine back to where Tess was waiting in the woods for him. Her clothes were so fashionable that the country people would have noticed her. "I think we should keep walking inland, away from the coasts," said Claire as they finished eating. "We can hide there for a while. Later on, when they stop looking for us, we can go to a port and get right out of the country." But their plans were vague. They were like two children who think only of the moment. The weather was warm and they enjoyed walking together. However, in the afternoon they did not find any suitable cottages to stay in, and it was too cold to sleep outside. They had walked about 15 miles when they passed a large empty house in the middle of the woods. "All those rooms empty," said Tess, "and we have no shelter." "We can stay the night there," said Claire. "Look, there's a window open. The caretaker probably airs the rooms in the daytime. We can climb in. Nobody will know." And so they did. They chose a bedroom with heavy old-fashioned furniture and a huge old bed. They kept quiet while the caretaker came to shut the windows in the evening. Then the house was theirs. They ate some of the food they had brought and went to bed in total darkness. During the night she told him about his sleepwalking just after their wedding. "You should have told me at the time. Don't think of the past. Think of the present. Tomorrow may mean the end of our happiness." But when tomorrow came, it was wet and foggy. It seemed that the caretaker only came on fine days, so they were alone in the house. They had enough food and wine, and stayed there for the next 5 days. It was the honeymoon they had never had. They had no contact with people, and only noticed changes in the weather. Neither mentioned the depressing period from their wedding day to the present. They lived for the moment, and were completely happy. When Angel suggested leaving their shelter and travelling to a port like Southampton or London, Tess was unwilling. Why put an end to sweetness and happiness? Outside, everything is confused and sad. Here, we are quite content. Angel agreed. Inside was forgiveness and love. Outside was eventual punishment. "And," she said, putting her cheek against his, "I want you to go on loving me. I'm afraid you might reject me one day for what I've done. Then I would rather be dead. I must have been mad to kill him, but I don't want to be alive when you reject me for it." They stayed for one more day, but the caretaker came early that fine sunny morning. She wanted to open the windows in the bedrooms, which she did not usually do, and opened their bedroom door. She saw the young couple lying in the big bed, fast asleep, and hurried away to tell her neighbours. Tess and Angel woke soon after and decided to leave immediately. They dared not stay any longer. When they were in the woods, Tess turned to look at the house. "So much happiness in that house," she whispered. "My life can only be a question of a few weeks. Why couldn't we have stayed there?" "Don't say that, Tess. We'll go northwards and get to a port. They won't find us." They kept going all day and most of the night. passing the cathedral city of Melchester and reaching open land. It was a windy, cloudy night. They walked on grass, so as not to make any noise on the road. They were alone and in darkness. Suddenly Claire almost bumped into a great stone rising up in front of him. Moving forwards carefully, they found other stones, standing tall and black against the night sky. "What on earth is this place?" Claire asked. "Listen!" cried Tess. The wind playing on the huge stones produced a strange tune, like the notes of a great harp. The couple walked slowly into the middle of the great circle of stones. "It's Stonehenge!" cried Claire. "The pagan temple?" "Yes, older than the centuries, older than the d'Urbervilles." "Let's stay here tonight, Angel," said Tess, lying down on a flat stone which was still warm from the day's sunshine. "We'd better not. This place can be seen for miles in daylight." "I feel at home here," murmured Tess. "You used to say at Talbothays that I was a pagan. Do you remember?" He bent over her and kissed her. "Sleepy, are you, dearest?" "I love it here," she said. "I have been so happy with you. And here I have only the sky above my face. There is nobody in the world except us two." Claire thought she could rest a while here. He put his coat over her and lay down beside her. "Angel," she asked presently, as they listened to the wind among the stones, "if anything happens to me, will you take care of Liza Lou?" "I will." "She is so good and pure. Oh, Angel, I wish you would marry her if you lose me, as you will do soon." "If I lose you, I lose everything." "She has all the best of me, without my bad side, and if she were yours, it would almost seem as if we were not separated by death. Well, I won't mention it again." There was silence for a while. Angel could see the first light in the east. They had not much time. "Did they sacrifice to God here?" she asked. "No, to the sun." "That reminds me, dear. Tell me, do you think we shall meet again after we are dead? I want to know." He kissed her to avoid replying. "Oh, Angel, that means no," she almost sobbed. "And I so wanted to see you again. So much, so much. Not even you and I, Angel, who love each other so much." He could not answer. Soon she fell asleep on the stone of sacrifice. The night wind died away, and the stones looked black in the half-light. Something seemed to move in the distance. It was a figure approaching Stonehenge. Claire wished they had gone on, but it was too late. He turned and saw another, and another. They were uniformed men closing in on Tess, with slow, purposeful steps. Claire jumped up wildly, looking round for a way to escape.
"It's no use, sir," said the nearest policeman. "We've surrounded the place."
"Let her finish her sleep," he begged in a whisper, as the men gathered round the stone. He held her hand. She was breathing more like a trapped animal than a woman. All waited in the growing light, their faces and hands silver, the stones grey. When the light was strong, she awoke. "What is it, Angel?" she said, sitting up. "Have they come for me?" "Yes, dearest, they have." "That is right. I am almost glad. This happiness could not have lasted." She stood up and went towards the waiting men. "I am ready," she said quietly. One July morning, the sun shone on two figures climbing the hill leading out of the fine city of Wintoncester. They were young, but they walked bent in sorrow. One was Angel Clare, the other Tess's younger sister, Liza Lou. Hand in hand with pale, tear-stained faces, they walked in silence. When they reached the top of the hill, they heard the town clocks strike 8. They turned quickly and looked back at the city. They could see the cathedral, the college, and the prison very clearly. A tall post was fixed to the prison tower. A few minutes after 8, as they watched, a black flag moved slowly up the post. The gods had finished playing with Tess. Society had seen justice done. Her d'Urberville ancestors slept on in their tombs uncaring. The two silent watchers dropped to the ground and stayed there without moving for a long time. The flag waved in the wind. As soon as they had strength, they stood up, joined hands again, and continued slowly on their way.